Jen turns on the drum roll as soon as we start.
And we are live.
Okay.
Welcome everyone to another Street Entrepreneurs Workshop. Today we're going to be talking about makers. And we have two makers with us here today who are going to share a little bit about their entrepreneurial experiences and their lessons as artists and business people. I invited them to come because I was really impacted by their story of resilience and how they reinvented their business after Hurricane Sandy. And I think there's a lot to learn from that, and we can possibly, or you can possibly take some inspiration and use that in your own businesses to create greater resiliency. So without further ado, guys, feel free to take it away. I'm going to go ahead and share your presentation.
Awesome.
And
Hi, everyone. We're happy to be here. My name is DB Lampman.
And I'm Scott Van Campen.
And we are the co-founders of Makerspace NYC. So we have a little short presentation that we can show you that kind of gives you an overview of what our business is, what our business model is, and what we do at the Makerspace. So I'm going to switch to my screen, and we can go through the things. So
basically,
yeah, I'll let Scott get to
the 2 minute pitch, right? Basically, Makerspace NYC is a community-based nonprofit workshop, and within our space, we actually operate two spaces, one at our Staten Island location on the North Shore here in Stapleton, Staten Island, and we have another location in Brooklyn at the Brooklyn Army Terminal, and that's the Futureworks Makerspace. And we actually got our start as a business incubator working in partnership with the New York City Economic Development Corp. And we sort of converted our architectural and sculptural metalworking studio into the Makerspace after Hurricane Sandy flooded our shop. So we had 3.5 feet of salt water go through our metal shop, and sort of the stars kind of aligned with the city setting up looking for a business incubator in Staten Island. And we sort of pitched the idea of a makerspace being a business incubator. And we were awarded a contract that was for 3 years to get a start as a makerspace here, encouraging people to come in, learn the tools that we have, and really start businesses within our space. So that's what was sort of the very beginnings of our space, but it's really turned into so much more than that, in that we work with artists and, of course, entrepreneurs and helping them prototype things, but we support all kinds of groups within our community. School groups come here and see us making things. We do hands-on building projects with us. We help people, sort of get a foothold in their market where they can come in and start earning money with our equipment, and then as their business gets rolling, they can expand and start purchasing their own equipment and renting space in the neighborhood and moving out of our space.
So we have two locations. Staten Island Makerspace is our original location, which was, like Scott said, it was originally his metal shop. He still runs a business making things for people, architectural metal things like railings, stairs, fancy kitchens, furniture, all sorts
kinds of wacky things.
Scott's been welding for about 30 years. He's really fantastic at it. And we're both artists too, so we both have a background in fine art and sculpture. So his metal work is often, people hire him when they want something really super creative or unusual, high-end, custom things. So I also make sculpture, large-scale sculptures. So this was our space, and we just decided, we had this idea that we wanted the community to come in and be able to have the same experience as we do. We have access to tools and equipment to work on their things. So we put together the idea of the Makerspace, and we first opened Staten Island Makerspace in 2013.
We actually opened 1 year to the day after Hurricane Sandy
Yes.
flooded the shop.
Yeah. So originally it was just a metal shop. And then when we first got the idea for the Makerspace, we invited people here and asked them, do you have anything you want to learn? Do you have anything you want to teach? Do you have any equipment that you could donate? Things like that. So we ended up getting a full wood shop equipment donated. And then over the years, we've expanded and added, more digital technology, 3D printers, laser cutters.
We built our own 4x8 CNC router
Right.
at this shop here.
We have a ceramic studio here at Staten Island, and then we also do blacksmithing. And we have an in-house radio station, which has about 100 DJs that broadcast live on the internet.
And all kinds of genres and music and talk radio and everything you can imagine, everything you'd want to listen to on a radio comes out of their radio station. Makerparkradio.nyc is their webpage.
Yeah, if you want to check them out.
Yeah.
So school groups come through here, and there's a lot of things that are happening here. About 2 years ago, we had the opportunity through the city again to open a new space in Brooklyn. So we took over a space at the Brooklyn Army Terminal that the city had set up, which is 3 times the size of the space that we have here in Staten Island. And it's got a lot. We've got a lot of digital technology. We've got a lot of 3D printers. We've got how many? 5 laser cutters.
5 laser cutters.
We've got a water jet cutter there.
CNC router.
CNC routers. We've got a big, beautiful sewing room there. So there's a lot of fashion designers, for instance, coming through that space working on projects. A lot of architects using the laser cutters. But it's, we operate both spaces similarly in such that we have members that come through, and it's kind of like a gym. So people can purchase low-cost monthly memberships. We also offer free memberships to people that apply that are under a certain income threshold. And so members come in, they have to show that they're proficient on equipment, or they can take classes and learn how to use equipment.
Right. So if our members come in, or you don't even have to be a member to take a class, but if if you're interested in welding and just want to get familiar with it and maybe find out if that's something that you like to do, then you can come in and take a class. And currently, due to COVID situation right now, we're not doing our group classes. We're doing one-on-one training, which it's kind of beneficial to the individuals because we can sort of tailor the learning experience specifically to what people are wanting to learn, which is kind of an interesting way to do it. When when you have a larger group of people, you sort of teach in broad strokes stuff. But like last night, I had a guy call up and he's like, "I'm working on a car. I'm welding body panels. I just want to learn some TIG welding just so I can do this better." And I can focus a class for him just specifically in light gauge welding. So the one-on-one training is kind of a unique experience, and we're getting used to it. It's a little bit different for us as teachers to do that, but we want to get people in the space and get them up to speed with whatever projects they want to make.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we do have in Staten Island is we have an outdoor space, which is called Maker Park. And it was an empty lot that was across the street from us that we convinced the city to let us use, basically. And we've got shipping containers set up there, and we do a lot of outdoor sculpture. So it's got public art, sculpture, but we do classes out there, like we do the blacksmithing classes out there. Sometimes we have groups come in from, corporate team building things that come in and do classes too.
And that's the outdoor space is also a space for the community. We've been hosting since the viruses sort of shut down a lot of artistic programming and theaters and that sort of thing. We've been hosting a few groups. One is Poetry in the Park, and they come in and they spend a couple hours socially distant in the park reading poetry that people have been working on. We have a Shakespeare reading group that has been meeting on a weekly basis. They come in and do, what are their, King Lear?
They're reading King Lear at the moment.
Yeah.
Different community groups. This weekend we've got the Muslim Sisters of Staten Island coming in to do an art workshop for their community. So different kinds of things happening all the time. Family programs, kids and families come in and we do some workshops out there too. So that's nice. We did have a big K through 12 program. Right now it's a little on hiatus because of the schools being in session, out of session. I don't know what's going on.
We're not sure what the schools in New York are doing.
But anyway, so eventually we'll have school groups back. Just at the moment, it's not really happening. But
one of the things that we've been working with school groups on is our steam wagon, and that is a mobile makerspace. It's actually a 1988 bread delivery truck that we've converted into basically a mobile makerspace, a little lab, and we have on that truck, we have a 3D printer, a vinyl cutter, small sewing machine, big toolbox with a lot of hand tools, a chop saw, drill press, and we would go into school groups or go to schools with our steam wagon and do hands-on building projects with kids and really sort of give them the opportunity. So if they couldn't get the bus and get down to our space to see us actually make something, we could go to their school and work with kids directly at that school. And we would work with upwards of like 5 classes a day. Currently, that's all on hold until we get through this sort of socially distant situation, because there's not a lot of room in that truck, and we've sort of got that on hold. But that's been a very big, exciting thing to work with elementary, middle school students on.
Yeah. So that's kind of in a nutshell what we do.
Thank you so much for that introduction.
Yeah.
That was perfect. So how many times have you guys had to pivot?
Wait a minute. How many times have we had to what?
Pivot.
Had to pivot your business?
Well, so when we first started, that was one. We had to switch from just being our space to bringing the community in. So that was a big one.
I think taking on the education for schools was sort of a pivot, because when from my perspective, when we started Makerspace, I was like, we're gonna make things. We're gonna teach people how to make things, and they're gonna come in and we're gonna let them loose, and they're gonna get all kinds of cool tools, and they're gonna make really cool stuff. And I don't think I really envisioned the education programs developing as big as they did and have.
Yeah, and certainly when we put together a business plan and wrote out a whole business plan that we submitted. I think I think the general structure, I think we kind of had a good idea of what we were going to do from the beginning, but we have certainly had to make adjustments and changes as we have gone on. Like the school groups got bigger than we expected. On the flip side, right now, there's no school groups, so we have a huge loss of income at the moment. So that's a hard thing to do. We're trying to figure that out.
Yeah, I mean, we've lost over a third of our operating budget.
Yeah.
That is really hard.
Which is big. Yeah.
Yeah. And how did you arrive at a makerspace in the first place?
I think we had sort of known about the Makerspace idea and the concept of it for a few years before we opened.
I had actually had a piece at the World Maker Fair here in New York City in 2011. It was a mobile brewing machine that I built with a friend of mine who was a home brewer, and it was sort of a steampunk inspired project. We call it Brewing as Art, and it's literally it was a beer making machine. It made 10 gallons of beer in a batch, But we actually got support from our local arts council to build that. And, we pitched that the art of making beer and the art of making sculpture go hand in hand. And our work sample was actually a 6-pack of beer that Mark had brewed with a custom carrier, steel and wood carrier that I had fabricated.
That is super cool.
But anyway, so we had been to the maker fairs and we knew about the maker community, and we just started researching different kinds of maker spaces. There's maker spaces all over the world, so there's all different kinds of maker spaces. Also what they call fab labs, which is similar. So as we started thinking about what we wanted to do, we were looking at different models and sort of picking and choosing from what other people do, of what we liked and what we thought we could do well, and
sort of gaining inspiration, but also, we also reached out to our community. As DB said earlier, we'd kind of host events, and people would come down and be like, "What do you guys want to learn? What do you see happening in this space?" And really wanted the community to have a say in sort of what the space developed as.
That's pretty cool.
One of the things we changed was we used to have a sewing room here in Staten Island, but it just wasn't getting used. Nobody was using it. And then a bunch of people, different members and other people that in the community kept asking about ceramics. So, it sort of seems like whenever things work out for a reason, and like all of a sudden we had like 3 different people donate different ceramics equipment, a kiln and pottery wheels, and all of a sudden we had a whole bunch of ceramics equipment.
And literally all of a sudden, like in a week, we had a whole ceramics room.
And then right around the same time, we had opened the Brooklyn space, and Brooklyn has a beautiful big sewing room. So it was like, okay, we don't need that here because people can access it there, and we could set up ceramics here. So
You guys are so malleable, so it seems like you're adapting to the demand of members constantly.
Yeah.
So before you opened a makerspace, you both were artists and making money as artists. Let's talk a little bit about the business of art, right? And do you ever feel like you have to compromise the art to make money?
It's always kind of a challenge, like working, there's different, like you're working in the studio and you're working on your piece and you're sort of being in your creative moment. That's a different experience than it is if you're working for a client and you're making something artistic for somebody or a commissioned piece for somebody. Like right now, I've been working for a few years on a big public art commission. But like the original sort of creative moment only lasted like a really short period of time, and now it's like business. Years worth of contract negotiations and all stuff that I'm not really all that excited to do, but it's all part of what I do.
Yeah, and I think from my side of it, being a fabricator and an artist, I still get my creative juices out in the projects I'm fabricating, even if I'm making those for other people.
Right.
That's a little bit different.
When we go to actually build the sculpture and install it, that'll be fun again,
Right.
But I don't know how many years it's going to take to get to that point.
Right.
How much is that? How much is like the fun part, and how much is like sending invoices and prospecting clients and that sort of stuff?
It's funny. So I
depends
feel
on
like
the day. Sometimes it depends on the project.
Yeah.
There's a lot of times where for me, probably 20% of the time I'm doing like the creative aspect, and then 80% of the time is just paperwork. But
yeah,
Scott might be different because he's more hands-on all the time. He's like building stuff more regularly.
Yeah, and I hate sitting at a desk. It's something I have to do, but it's literally last thing on my list. I'll do the whole project. I'll get it done. I'll get it out the door, get it installed. And then it's like, oh, I got it. And, have fun and like, I'm excited about that whole process. And then it's like, oh, I got to send the invoice. Oh, I got to sit down. I got to do emails. And I'm terrible with emails. I hate that. Like that stress around that and like sort of being kind of bad at like getting back to people. I need to work on personally. But it's like once you get in the habit of it, and you're like, kind of nail it down. What I like to do is I like to come in early in the morning in the shop, first hour or two, get all the paperwork out of the way, and then I actually just don't even look at my email until the next day. It would be my ideal, But people nowadays are like, they send an email and then if you don't respond in an hour, they call you. Did you get my email? It's like, well, no, I'm in the shop. I'm making stuff.
Yeah.
I think,
No, please go ahead.
I was just gonna say, there's a part I sort of enjoy writing grants or writing proposals. So like sometimes I get a certain satisfaction out of that. So
you guys are pretty good coworkers, like pretty good teams.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and DB is an amazing grant writer, and really is the reason that we can finesse sort of wacky ideas that we come up with into opportunities like the Makerspace and the Makerspace in Brooklyn as well, the Futureworks Makerspace there. It's, there was, like, we had this idea, oh, let's do a Makerspace, right?
Yeah.
And the city's like, well, you got to talk to us about your give us the plan, give us this, give us a pro forma. Pro forma.
Yeah.
What's a Google pro forma? Pro forma. And
we had like a crash course in Business 101 when
yeah.
they first opened.
Yeah.
And but DB's really does have an ability to make get those words put together so that the folks that we deal with that are on the business side actually understand what we're trying to do.
That's pretty great. So you guys are a great team, and I know you two are also married.
Yeah.
Can you talk to us a little bit about what's it like working with a family member? How do you set the boundaries of like, this is work, this is home?
Well, I mean, it's very good that I'm not demanding.
It's not always that easy. Sometimes work and home boundaries don't always, like, we wake up in the morning to have coffee and then start in on talking about what we have to do for the day. So sometimes we have to really kind of like just look at each other and say, okay, stop. We're not going to talk about work at all. We're going to go do something else.
Is that hard? Do you find yourself saying like, we're going to talk about work, and then 2 seconds later?
Yeah, because it's like so much part of our life, it's not.
And then, I think part of the hard part around that, right? I mean, it's one thing to be like sort of set boundaries and be like, oh, I'm talking about work again or whatever. But like, if we work together, but we don't actually, like, some days we don't even see each other. I'll be in Brooklyn, she'll be in Staten Island, or vice versa. And, I like talk about my day when I come home from work. And it's tough to like talk about your day, and, maybe you're, complaining, maybe not complaining, but you're like, oh, kind of just running through the day. Oh,
like,
this was frustrating.
I can't complain about my boss at night,
Right. But it's, it's
like, I have this colleague that.
Yeah. He's going to remain anonymous. Yeah, that guy. But it's like tough because, like, when you vent, because it's so intimate, because we know so much about each other's day-to-day interactions, you don't really get that blow off. And like, I start talking, and DB will know exactly who it was and sort of know the outcome already. And it's okay, that's fine. But I got to remind myself to like not be talking about work, right? When I come home, I try not to vent or like try not to do that, because she's had her day, and it is sort of a tricky thing.
Yeah.
You
How do you deal with business disagreements?
Well, I'm right.
I mean, speaking like as if your co-founder is a family member, if your business partner is a family member, what advice do you have for making decisions jointly in a way that doesn't impact your personal relationship?
I think it's important to listen. And we have some disagreements. I mean, I'm not, of course we do. But I think it's important to understand the perspective and also be respectful in that realm. There's not a lot that
I think we're generally kind of on the same page most of the time. So the disagreements are generally on a small scale. They're not like completely like.
We don't have any big blowups.
Yeah.
That's good. That's lucky.
But I do think, in terms of working with, like, because we work together, we live together, and like, I think it is important for us to kind of have some space from each other to some degree. Like you said, like when we're working, like we could be working in the same space, both be in Staten Island and Scott's down in the shop and I'm in the office or something like that. So we're not always on top of each other,
Yeah, it honestly makes me think of all the people that are working from home.
Yeah, I mean, so that's very, like, people are like not used to that, and so like I keep hearing stories about people who are like, my husband's driving me crazy. I'm not used to like.
Yeah. Or like I was in a conference call and the kids were running around naked in the background.
Yeah.
They don't let me run around naked in the welding shop anymore.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Scott.
But even still, like, our daughter just started college and she's doing college from her first semester from home right now.
Yeah.
But even in like her bedroom, she set up like a little, like we helped her kind of set up a little space so that she could have her college space, like.
It's so lucky when your parents are makers, because you can just like, hey, can you weld me a desk? But in all seriousness, I really want to get to the future of makers in America. So there's a perception that the robots are taking over.
Yeah.
Right? If it's not made in China, it's not sold.
Right.
How much of that is real? How much of that is maybe sensationalizado? How do you say that in English?
Sensationalized.
There you go. Thank you. By the way, happy Hispanic Heritage Month. I'm wearing my Frida shirt. And how much is like a genuine concern for you guys?
I think that there is sort of there's a constant automation of things happening.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also really important and really integral. Like we see it in New York City, that there's the small maker and the small manufacturer is still a really integral part of the economy here.
Mm-hmm.
I think that you see people making on a small scale in their communities, and there's like this kind of going back to being sort of really sort of hyper local, where you get your vegetables in the neighborhood that you grow them, that they grow in the neighborhood or whatever. Like it's
a movement now.
I think it's a movement, and I think it's in response to like the everything coming from China or from robots or whatever, but I think it's still really, we see it really important.
I think, and this is sort of my perspective, I've been thinking about this a bit, that I think the shutdown from the COVID-19 and really the disruption in the supply chain that we've seen over the last 6-8 months at a global scale, I think really sort of opened a lot of people's eyes. And I think we're going to see a movement that's developing still, that it has not been defined yet, of the artisanal maker, of the industrial freelancers, of people that are going to want to create their own thing, right? I mean, there's nothing better than to say, I made that, right? And you're going to see people that maybe don't have skills, but have ideas and want to build those skills to go with those ideas so that they can create things at the local level. I mean, you look at the response for PPE during the coronavirus shutdown initially. When we shut down on March 17th, and literally that day ordered thousands of pounds of plastic and supplies. And the following week we were making face shields. And we ended up buying plastic actually from San Diego because the Eastern Seaboard was totally sold out. Over a weekend, you could not find the material to make plastic face shields just literally overnight.
And the city couldn't buy them from China. They couldn't. They were calling us and other makerspaces and other local places around the city asking us to make them, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah.
And so, we went right into production. We made just over 10,000 face shields in a matter of just a couple weeks, and distributed those and got those into the hands of the hospitals and that sort of thing. But there was a huge movement around New York City of people coming together, other maker spaces and individual makers that had 3D printers, that had maybe a CNC router or laser cutters, and they were making components and then assembling them at some of these maker spaces. We have the ability in our space. We had all that equipment, so we just sort of grabbed a bunch of material and just were making our own. But just an amazing process with all these other makers in the city that came together to produce all this PPE for local hospitals who were desperately in need at the time.
Right. Yeah, local supply chains, have always been spoken about, but now we've seen it in action, just how important it is to have a capacity to manufacture locally and to source, grow, and sell locally.
Yeah.
I haven't necessarily seen the research, so I can't speak to the specifics of how much more eco-friendly it is, or how, but just from a sheer standpoint of like emergency response, right? That's huge.
Yep.
Right.
And you guys have survived multiple emergencies. Talk to us a little bit about Hurricane Sandy and what that meant for your work as makers and artists and entrepreneurs, and how you pivoted and built a more resilient business.
Yeah. So we were our shop was. I mean, it wasn't destroyed. The building wasn't knocked down. It didn't burn to the ground. But and it's a metal shop, so everything is really heavy, and as far as tooling and that sort of thing. But we saw it coming. Right? Hurricanes don't move incredibly fast. It was coming up the coast, and I remember seeing the weather predictions that there was going to be a 12-foot storm surge. Right? Where we're at in our shop here, we're a couple hundred yards off of the water in New York Harbor. So, and really our elevation is probably about 4 feet, if that. So I started taking all the hand tools that I could, the electric tools, grinders, anything I could carry, my welders, I put up on cranes, I put stuff up in my office, and just anything I could think of that I could carry. We just, for a couple of days, just put everything up there. And I remember one of my neighbors, a mechanic next door, came over and he's like, "What are you doing?" And we're cleaning and everything's, sort of broken down, and the welders are hanging up on cranes. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, we're going to get wet." And he's like, "No, it's going to blow by. It's not going to be any big deal." And I was like, "Yeah, no, I think you should start picking things up." And he didn't. And, lost all of his computers, lost his emissions testing machine, just thousands and thousands of dollars. I mean, we still had about $80,000 in damages. We did lose a lot of tooling, and that was in some boxes that I didn't, the job site boxes. We had several of those that were full of tools, and we put those on job sites and they keep the tools dry. It didn't dawn on me that they don't float. And when the water got up above the seam on the panel on the top hinge, all the water went in and just filled up the boxes full of water. So all the holes in there were just totally shot. And we had a lot of rusty material. And every once in a while, I'll get a project where somebody wants something that has a rusty look to it. But for the most part, we had to throw all that material out. So about 9 tons of material that we cycled out. Stainless steel. So we work in steel, stainless steel, brass, bronze, aluminum. And the steel dust just in the shop got up and mixed with the water, and that got on the stainless steel. And literally you had like rust spots on all the stainless. And I can't sell that to a client because I potentially might have a stain on it later. So, go ahead.
I was going to say, I mean, so that we had, it flooded in here and we had damage and then we had to clean it up. But right before that happened was when we had started talking about opening up the makerspace and what that might look like. But we really weren't sure like if that was going to happen or if we were going to do it. It was just kind of an idea at the time. But then after Hurricane Sandy, people came in here and helped us clean and oil things, and started seeing people come into the space, and we started like really seeing what it might look like with people as a community space. So, you know, it was a blessing in disguise that happened to us, because it really gave us sort of a clear like turnaround point. Like that was the point when we were like, oh, well, now is our opportunity we have to clean all this mess up anyway.
Yeah. So it's like you started building community around that.
So that's how that happened, and that's, you know, wasn't the reason we started the Makerspace, but it was certainly the catalyst for us to get going on it. So
that's awesome. That's awesome.
When life serves you lemons, you make lemonade. You know, you figure.
Yeah. So if you had to think back through the lessons of both Hurricane Sandy and COVID, and what can makers do to be more resilient?
I think it's really being flexible and being able to, you know, you can't predict what's going to happen ever, really.
Yeah.
So, you know, it's important to stick to your goals and have your ideas and stick to what you believe in that you want to do. But it is also very helpful to be able to be flexible and to say, well, this isn't quite working. Maybe what if I do it this way? You know, like you don't want to make too many really big compromises, but, you know, you need to be able to shift gears if you need to.
Yeah, and you need to be prepared, and you need to be open to new things. You know, you need to, you know, the Makerspace was sort of a long shot. We didn't know. We'd never run a nonprofit before. Probably never going to start a nonprofit again. Yeah, it's a lot of work. And it has been a big learning curve for us, but you know, there's not a lot that we say no to, and being optimistic and being willing to figure things out, and you know, come up with solutions. Right? Problems are not a hindrance; they are an opportunity for a solution, and you want to get creative with it, and you know, determine next steps, and then take those steps, and be prepared if things aren't working to switch gears a little bit, change direction, pivot a little bit, as you will.
I think one of the biggest reasons for any of our success is not us, it's the people around us. And you know, the people that we've met through the Makerspaces and different organizations that we've partnered with have been like that has opened up our world so much, and it's so incredible, you know, being able to have other people give you the gift of what they know is fantastic.
And
Sounds like you guys are really open to feedback.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's almost like you mentioned the sewing machine as an example. Like, oh, well, no one was using that room. So
Right.
I think someone else might have stuck. I'm like, well, this sewing machine is going to work. We paid for it, where you guys are like, well, it's not working.
Right.
So what will? People want pottery. Can we get pottery donated? Right. And that sounds like a really key lesson for success. What would you say are other lessons you've learned as business people and artists? How can you communicate your value? How do you price your goods and your services?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard, especially, like, I think you really have to, I think one of the things that artists and maybe small business owners don't value so much is their own time, like the time it takes, if Scott's making something, a chair for somebody, like the time it takes him to work on that project, it has to be calculated into the overall price of the product. And so, creative people are, always give away their services for nothing. And, it's not a good thing to do.
No, and we actually have these sort of conversations with our members, and when people are working on things and you see them, it's part of the conversation, right? It's like, well, oh, so you're doing that for somebody, you're getting paid for it. Okay, cool. Are you making your rate? And like that conversation of what is your rate? What are you worth? That's a very heavy conversation. It's a personal thing. You look at a project and there's a lot of factors. There's, what is your time worth? What are the materials involved that you have to, if you got to buy material, can you recycle material? Do you see, do you already have that material in stock that maybe you can just repurpose off of another job? So you're not actually buying that material, but you want to keep that in mind so that you incorporate that into your price, right? You're sort of reselling that material. Everything you see behind us here is dropped from projects I've bought. So we're sitting in our metal shop in Staten Island, and there's probably 12 or 15 tons of steel and aluminum and stainless steel behind us. That is all material that's left over from jobs that I've done in the last 18 years in this space. And when something comes in, I can just, if I have a small piece of material, I can just incorporate that in. I get my rate plus the material, but I paid for that material maybe 10 years ago. And, we want to sort of be able to factor that stuff in. I have lots of ways that I sort of work my rate. I have a basic day rate. If somebody wants to come in and just do some welding, I have different rates for different types of welding based on hourly or day rate. I sometimes price jobs by material. So if I have a job that is expensive on the material or we kind of, I'll actually look at it both ways, right? Sort of, does my time to make it make sense? But I also look at sort of the material rate times the number, which is usually either 3.9 to 4.2 for fabrication. So if it's $100 on material, does it make sense to get $400 or $450 for that project at the end of the day? And then I'll calculate that backwards and be like, well, it's going to take me, is it going to take me 8 hours to do it? And am I making an hourly rate there that I'm comfortable with? And then also it's for a client, right? Is it somebody who I like? Is it somebody who maybe is a real, a client that's real pushy and I don't really get along with well? And I can charge them a little bit more. Maybe it's a customer that actually has more money, or maybe it's, the mechanic from next door that just needs a small tack weld on a muffler, and for a cup of coffee, So you have a bit of a sliding scale for your rate, right? And you want to, at the end of the day, if you're saying I'm going to do something for X amount of dollars, right? That's my work. And And that's very important to adhere to that. And sure, surprises come up, and clients are very understanding when something comes up and you're like, well, the material cost me more. I had to get more material and we figured the job wrong. You can have those conversations, but really I think, honesty with yourself and being honest with your clients are two of the biggest things that you can do as far as client-customer relations. And if you do a good job and your customer is happy, they will pay your rate.
Mm.
Yep.
Sometimes it's too into like Scott's talking more about like pricing for like a product and a service and stuff like that. But like in terms of like the makerspace, like we've had to come up with prices for like what do we charge for a class? Like we have the way we do classes here with our teachers is we give them, they take 50% of the tuition.
Mm-hmm.
So we talk with the teacher and we decide like how many students do you want? What's your maximum amount of students? What's your minimum amount of students? And then we kind of look at what other places around are charging for a similar type of class and try
because there is a market rate involved.
Yeah, like a revenue share.
Yeah.
I've also heard some entrepreneurs, even we were talking to Scott, some entrepreneurs have a progressive. I know one entrepreneur has a progressive rate. So if this organization doesn't pay their workers fair wages or what she considers are fair wages, then she charges more and then donates that money. So yeah, I'm seeing more and more of that kind of like capital consciousness.
Yeah,
you might call it. That's interesting.
Yeah, and like sometimes we put up things like different kinds of classes, and then nobody signs up for it, and well, maybe we charge too much for that, so maybe let's try next time. We'll charge less.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a see what works and see what doesn't.
Yeah. Well, there's so many lessons here because there's lessons from artists who are violin teachers and music teachers who are trying to figure out their pricing.
Right.
And there's also lessons for makers, for people who are making art and are making things with their hands and don't necessarily know what to charge. And when I speak, particularly with the people that are making things with their hands, sometimes they don't take into account their time. They're like, oh, well, the material is this.
Right.
I'm upselling it this much. I'm like, yeah, but you spent how many hours making it? And what would you guys say is the difference between like, this is your hobby and this is your business, right? Do you ever have talks with your makers and say like, okay, guys, are you making a business or is this your hobby? Right. And either is fine, right?
Right. And
well, absolutely.
It depends on whether or not you care about making money or not.
Yeah.
You won't, if it's important to you to be able to try to make a living off of what you're making, that's a different than if you just want to have some personal joy out of doing something that's made.
Right. And oftentimes it's the hobbyists that are good at what they do that then start realizing they can start generating income from that.
Yeah.
And, the adage, of course, is, if you love what you do, you never work a day in your life type thing. But people who are passionate about making can make money at it.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
And it does take time. It's not easy. When I started my own business about 18 years ago. Well, I mean, we've been here 18. So yeah, like 18, 19 years ago. And it was years. It was probably 5 or 6 years before I stopped losing sleep about where's the next job coming from? What am I going to do? And I realized that, the next job's going to come. And I sort of had this epiphany. It's sort of this like ding moment, that was like, oh, it's going to be okay. And so in the downtime, when I didn't have a job that I was specifically working on, I would do maintenance on the machines and clean the shop and sweep. And to this day, I still enjoy sweeping, which is just, maybe that's a crazy thing, but it's like good for my head. right? It's just sort of a good thing to do in the shop. Keep yourself organized, keep yourself focused. And as you know, somebody's going to knock on the door. So the phone's going to ring, something's going to come in, and it's going to be somebody who's like, hey, I heard you can do this. Can, we work together? Can we do that? And, it definitely there was a period of years where it was just like, you lose some sleep, you're worried about it. Where's rent coming from? Do I have enough to pay myself? I paid all my vendors. Okay, well, I'm not taking as much. I can't pay myself as much this month, but I'm still making my rent. It's okay. But eventually it does sort of settle into a pattern. And with that pattern builds confidence. And, I think, again, if you're passionate about it, if it's something that you really want to do, you're going to build confidence and experience in that field. And it does pay off.
So I know some of the people that are watching, and I kind of want to give them a chance to ask some questions. So by the way, guys, you can ask questions on the Facebook Messenger, and I will read them out loud. You can also ask anonymous questions if you wish. But I'm gonna infer some of the questions based on what I know of them. So let's say you're working full time, and you love crochet. You've been doing crochet your whole life. It just relaxes you. You could do it all day. Mm-hmm. And you're thinking about leaving your stable government job that pays you health insurance and has a pension even, to do crochet full time, right? How might you prepare for that, right? And how do you budget your jobs, right? So if you get a commission, are you like, okay, well, I know that my next job is likely going to come between 1 or 2 months, hence this is how I can budget it. Like, how do you budget for the year, and how much does it vary year to year? I'm sure it's very different, in welding than crochet, right? But
well, right.
We have the subway goes by here every 15 minutes.
So I think, well, for this in particular situation, right?
Yeah.
Start that business on the side while you still have your day job.
Yeah.
And if it's something that you can do at home, that's great. That allows you to build experience, possibly build a stockpile of materials, start getting some small jobs coming in.
Right.
Always buy more material than you're going to need, especially because if you make a mistake, you have that material on hand. You don't have to wait for Amazon or go out and get it, go to the store, waste a couple hours. You got it. You just, back up a couple stitches and you pull out new material, whatever. I don't know much about crochet. But then, start working on that after hours, and build a foundation of clients.
Yeah, I think that with any kind of product you're making, like being able to, like, I think you can have an opportunity to set up an Etsy shop or something like that, and you can kind of do market research, just put out new products, see what people like, see what people, kind of, and then you can start building your inventory a little bit on the side until you get sort of a client base that you can, once I think that there's a, going from a full-time job to like something where you're just going to live on that is a big jump to make. It's not impossible, but it is a big jump to make. So if you can do it in little phases and steps and build your way to a point where your leap is just a little tiny jump, then that's easier than.
Yeah. So phase 1, create a shop. Test your assumptions about people want your baby crochet sweaters.
Right. And then all of a sudden, then
Halloween costume crochet.
You discover that everybody likes the pink ones, nobody likes the yellow one.
Yeah.
So then.
Right.
Or whatever, then you start building like seeing what people want, seeing what people,
Okay,
what you can, and how to price them, and sort of building it from there.
So here's a question from the people watching, and it has to do with sales.
Mm-hmm.
So how do you achieve consistent sales?
I don't know.
It's a hard one, right?
I think that is a hard one. And after running a makerspace for 8 years, I don't think we totally know what consistent sales are. It's a weird thing. Like some days you think it's going to be packed in the space and there's nobody there. And then some days you're like, well, it's a beautiful day out, nobody's going to show up, and then everybody shows up. It's kind of like that in when you're selling goods. I think you just experience. Just kind of keep plugging along, and be prepared, but have that confidence for when there's a slow time, right? Use that time to improve your product and gain new insights, and maybe test out a new technique, or explore something that maybe you read about or you're thinking about, and that will be something that you can add to your toolbox down the road, and maybe use that in some other regard.
I think consistent sales come from consistent clients,
So let's say you are in an industry that's like, people are going to build a door once, right? They're going to build up their steel wall once, Like, so you need a new client, right? There's no recurring client, is there?
Yeah, but like even here at the Makerspace, like we have people that take classes and they just take more and more classes just because they like to learn, and so that's a sale, and that's a type of person,
Yeah.
So you can cater to that and offer a consistently good product to them that they want,
And I also think it's an understanding of your market, right? So if you're making crochet baby vests, or
it's crochet Halloween costumes and
crochet.
so Halloween, right? So your big time is that lead up to Halloween,
pretty cool.
And that's going to be that's when you're going to you can work all year and sell out in 3 months,
Yeah.
And that's like you see some of the artisanal manufacturers that sell at like Christmas markets.
Mm-hmm.
They build up a big inventory of product, and then leading up to Christmas, that's their busy season, and they spend every day of the week for 5 weeks leading up to Christmas, and they're selling everything every day. This stuff's flying off the shelves, and then they have this stockpile of money that gets them through the next several months of quiet time.
That's a really good tip. Farmers markets and those type of events.
But even thinking about like somebody, if they're working on Halloween costumes, you could think about other different ways, other markets for something like that. Like there's the whole cosplay market, and there's comic people that dress up for Comic-Con and things like that. Like that's a huge thing, there's other, like you might think your market is just the Halloween market, but there might be other avenues that you could look into.
What about for makers that rely on in-person shopping? How might they transition to digital delivery and sales? Do you guys have any tips on that?
I don't know. We're trying to figure that out too, because like right now, we can't, like for instance, our school groups, like it's such like we have groups of kids that would come here and do a hands-on project, and like how we're trying to figure out like how do you reimagine that for a virtual, we're trying to figure out like can we do we can use like some technology to our advantage. Like for instance, you could give like a virtual demonstration of welding to kindergartners, which you couldn't do in person because it's dangerous. But on in this format, you could do that. So like that's one strategy of taking it and like saying like, well, that's the benefit that we could get from something. So I mean, I think in terms of a product that you need hands-on, like the more you can make it.
So I'm thinking particularly of an entrepreneur we have who's a candle maker, and a lot of her sales come from in-person shopping, brick and mortar.
Yeah.
And she started her candle making shop at the beginning of the year.
Yeah.
Right before the shutdown.
Right.
So she,
I think in regards to that, sorry to cut you off, but my first thought to that was obviously the smell of candles, right?
Yeah.
And
so like you smell them, you want them because they smell good. So
what about like making something that's very affordable for her to send, that's a smell sample, like a set of just, sort of taste samples that you would find at the grocery store or something, but just little bits of smell that she could very easily just drop in an envelope or somebody can go to their website and, spend $3 for a sample set. And then that 1 cent that they really like, and then they make their order.
Yeah, I mean, that's another thought too, just in terms of marketing on something like that, is to be able to market that feeling of what you imagine, like when you smell a candle that smells like fireplace or something like that. Like if you were marketing that feeling of what you would get from that candle, like you're gonna, I don't know, like I think that just like you can market a feeling not just through scent but also through visuals, I think.
Right.
Yeah, and she's actually making candle kits for people. So if people are watching and are interested, check out Sandstone Candles. But yes, thank you guys. We have hit time, but I want to thank you so much for taking the time. Do you guys have any final insights for makers and for artists and people operating spaces, or any last thoughts you'd like to share?
Just keep making stuff. Keep trying.
Trust in yourself. Yeah. Build confidence. It's going to be okay.
Yeah. I keep hearing. Go ahead.
And get out and vote.
Oh yes. Elections are coming. You can mail in Washington, D.C. You can mail like now. I think it might be the same in New York.
Yeah.
I think
so.
Early voting starts on October 24th. And this will be the first year that our daughter can vote. So we're going to go and do it in person.
That's so exciting. This is the first year I'm voting on a federal election as well.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah. I became a citizen 2 years ago, and I'm super excited about voting.
Awesome. Yeah.
Anyways, thank you guys. Have a beautiful day.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Ciao.